Welcome to Point of Sale Part 3. I'm going to start by going into Point of Sale, enter invoices, and I want to talk about transaction codes to start with. Transaction codes are a single character code that represents the type of transaction that you're doing in Point of Sale. If you press your up arrow and you change the code in the upper left-hand corner, that's going to dictate what type of transaction you're doing for the entire invoice. So if I were to change this to a code that means return or a code that means payment, that's going to be the only thing that I can do here. If I leave it as an I have the opportunity to do multiple things within the same invoice by entering the transaction code into a field on the actual invoice. So I'm going to go through these in a second. If I don't know my transaction code, I can either hit my Shift and question mark keys at the same time on my keyboard, or I can click on the transaction code help button in the right corner. So I'm going to click on that. Now you're going to see a listing of valid transaction codes when you do this, and yours may look different than mine because they're customizable per system. So you might see the same codes but a different description. You might see a different series of transaction codes, things like buyouts and buyout returns, return to vendors, and so on. These can be selected from a group of transaction codes that we provide in the background of SBC. And there are also transaction codes that are available for you to customize so that you can use them for any type of transaction that you'd like to do. So you'll see on my screen an I is for an invoice, that's for a sale, and then an M is for a credit memo, that's another word for a regular return. The customer just didn't want the merchandise. I'm going to skip a few of them. C is for a core return, that's pretty standard across all systems if you sell cores. An R is for a defective return, a P is for a payment, and so on. So I'm going to click on invoice, and I'm going to sell a couple of items on a ticket. So I'm going to type my clerk code, type in my customer number, press the enter key, and then enter through my ship to address. And I'm going to type in a couple of part numbers. Now notice that that part has a core, and it's split. The part number information shows on the top line, and the core deposit shows on the next line. And then I'm going to type in a CF110. I'm going to choose this one here, and I'm going to sell one of these. Okay, so I've created a pretty standard invoice. I'm going to finalize that ticket by going to the Home Tender screen. And because this is a house charge, it's going to assume that I just want to apply it to the house charge. So I'm going to do that by clicking on the Complete Transaction button. It's going to process my ticket, and then I'm good to continue on to the next invoice. So if I use my upper left-hand corner transaction code and I want to do a regular return, the keystroke for that is an M as in Mary. So I'm going to type in an M. And the first thing that it's going to ask me in this case is, do I have a reference number that I want to use? So for this example, I happen to know that my reference number of the ticket that was just finished is 100000396. And when I enter that, the entire ticket is going to be populated. Now this is the best way to do a regular return, especially if there's special pricing involved, if there were comments on the ticket that you want to make sure to show on the return ticket, or if there were multiple items that you're wanting to return. Now, I can add other items that were on a different invoice at this point if I'd like to return more merchandise here, or if the customer isn't returning all of this, I can use my delete line button on the right-hand side to delete one of the lines on my screen. So I'm going to delete line number 4. Press my enter key and it simply goes away. If I click on the Home to Tender key, because this was a house charge, it's going to assume that I want to apply it back to my house charge, and I'm going to assume that I want to do that as well, so I'm going to click on the Complete Transaction in the lower left corner, and that's going to finish my transaction for me. Okay, let's assume that that happens maybe a quarter of the time. The rest of the time, people just bring items back to you without a receipt. So if I wanted to, I could change my transaction code in the upper left corner. I could press my enter key through my ticket reference number if I know the original date or perhaps the original invoice number and I didn't know it at the time that I got that first question, I can simply enter it here, or I'm just going to press a 0 to bypass this screen. And when I type in my customer number, press my enter key, enter through my ship to, I can type in the part I want to return, CF110. Now what this is doing is it's going to go out to my history and find the last times that this item was purchased. It's going to show me a listing of all of these. In this case, I see that I've sold some of them for $301 and some of them for $299, so I can pick the less expensive item if the customer didn't bring me his receipt. If I want to choose to return it against one of these invoices, I simply press the Return to Use Sell Price button on the lower left corner. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to display a line that tells me the date of the purchase, the original purchase, and the original reference number. And then I'm just going to press my enter key through the number of pieces ordered, or I can type in a different number if I'm going to return multiples. Now you'll notice that in my transaction code field that's on the actual line of my part information, the transaction code is pulling that M without my say-so. The reason that that's happening is because I had changed my overall transaction code to an M, which, as I said before, if I change my overall transaction code, that's the only type of transaction I can do here. So I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to show you another way that you can do this. I'm going to click on the F8 to cancel ticket, and yes, I want to cancel this. I'm going to leave my transaction code as an I, type in my customer number, press my enter key, enter through my shipping information, and type in that same part number. Now you'll notice that my transaction code right now is an I as in Isaac. I'm going to press my up arrow key, and I can either type the keystroke of the code, or I can press my shift question mark button, and it's going to give me a listing of all of my valid transaction codes at this time. I'm going to click on the credit memo button. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to go out to part tracking. I can either choose one of these invoices to return against using that return to use sell price, or I can press the escape key, which I'll do this time, and you'll notice that it tells me that my transaction code is an M, the number of pieces ordered is a -1. I can override that if I need to. I'm going to say 2. Press my enter key, and now I have a line of return on my ticket. Now, since my overall transaction code is an I can go ahead and now sell something else. So I'm going to sell a 51515. Okay. On the previous ticket that we did, we also sold a part with a core. So I'm going to return the core now. So when I type in my part number, press my enter key, I'm going to press my up arrow, and I'm either going to press a C as in Charlie, which means core return, or I'm going to hit my shift question mark to pop up this window, and I'm going to click on the core return. It's going to go out to the history, and it's going to try and find a purchase. I'm going to choose a ticket to return against, press my enter key, and my transaction code being a C means that I am returning the core only. At the bottom of my screen, you're going to see an eligible for return number. So I have a legitimate number of items to return. Keep in mind, you may want to take that with a grain of salt if you're dealing with a really good customer. And I'm going to press the enter key, and that's going to return that core return that core credit for that customer. And you'll notice that there are 2 lines of information here. The first line is just identifying the part, but if you look at the extension, there are no extension dollars, and that means to me that I'm not returning the part, I'm simply returning that core. Again, because I chose to return against an invoice, it's giving me that purchased on message so that I know when this ticket, when the original ticket was purchased. I'm going to click on my Home to Tender button, and since I have a number of returns and a small purchase, my value for this ticket is going to be negative. That's fine with us. Some system administrators don't like to finalize transaction code I tickets as a negative number. That's completely up to you. So if your system administrator allows this, this is perfectly legitimate. I'm going to click on the F12 to complete the transaction, and that is going to put $80 back on my house charge. Now, if I'm in the middle of an invoice I'm going to add I'll just add one of these. And I press the home key. I have currently, because this customer is a house charge, it's assuming that I want to apply it to his house charge. Well, perhaps he doesn't want me to do that. There are two ways to override this. The first is to press my up arrow key to the C as in Charlie code, and then I can click any key on my keyboard, and it's going to pop up my payment window. Now the nice thing about this is that it's actually included my house charge button in that payment window, just in case he later decides that he actually wants to put it on his house charge. But in this case, I'm going to say that I'm going to pay a little bit with cash, and I'm going to do a split tender. So I'm going to click on cash, and instead of applying or taking a payment of $323 all in cash, I'm going to say he's going to give me $100 in cash. Press my enter key, and the window pops up again. I'm going to take $150 on a Visa, press my enter key, and then last I'm going to take a check for the difference. The difference is $73.33. If for whatever reason I ended up with my cash tender, or if I want to over type this number and take a check for more than that value, I absolutely can by entering the information, and in your lower right corner it'll give you the change due. In this case, since he's writing a check, I'm going to assume that he's doing the total amount of the amount due. I'm going to press my enter key, and then remember, over in this received by, you're going to want to put in your check number, press the enter key, and now I have a split tender for three different methods of payment, and I'm going to click on the complete transaction button to finish that. Okay, one more time. If I want to change my house charge and I don't want to up arrow here, I'm going to use another one of those control functions. I'm going to hold down my control key, press a T as in Tom, and that payment window is going to pop up again. I'm going to say that I'm going to take cash instead of putting it on the house charge. He's going to give me $20. I'm going to press my enter key. There's nothing for me to input into the received by, so I'm going to press the enter key again, and then I'm at the bottom of my invoice. Now that control T function and a number of other items are available in this help window. So if you click on that help window, again, the same as the help window that's in the center of point of sale, this is going to give you a number of control functions and function keys, and those shift F1, F2, F3s if you are looking for instruction on where to go next or some options that you might have while you're in point of sale. I'm going to click on the press any key to get back to point of sale. I'm actually going to delete this ticket, and I'm going to go through another ticket. So this ticket, I'm going to sell a part that has a core, 4D1. I press my enter key. I'm going to press my enter key again, and because of the way that my system is set up, it's automatically charging the core deposit. Now, this is an option for you. You can determine whether you want it to never charge the core, you want it to always charge the core, or you want to be asked. So whether you're asked, whether it never shows up, or whether it always shows up, once you've decided on those options, regardless of how you answered the question, here's the scenario. The customer calls you, they say that they're going to come and pick up a part, you ask if they have a returned core, and they say no, so you charge them for the part and for the core, and maybe you put the ticket on hold. The customer comes in at a later time and brings a core with them that you weren't anticipating. So in that case, if they're returning the same core for the part that I'm purchasing, or that they're purchasing, I'm going to press the up arrow key, and I'm going to change my transaction code to an X as an X-ray, and this is in my list if I hit my shift question mark. And what that's going to do for me is it's going to add a core deposit return line for me so that I don't have to delete the part and re-enter it, or I don't have to try and figure out how to do a core return at the same time. So again, if I type in a part number, or if I come to a screen where the core deposit sale is listed but the return is not, all I do is press the up arrow key and I change it to an X as an X-ray or exchange, and you're just adding that core deposit return line so that you can finalize your ticket without having to type any additional information onto your screen. To finish this ticket, I click on the Home to Tender. I either put it on my house charge, or remember, I can up arrow and change that house charge method of payment to any other immediate cash type of payment. Okay, I'm going to do one other item here, and then I'm going to be done with this particular video, and you'll get more instruction in session number 4. So let's say that I have a transaction that's very expensive and I want to take a special order deposit. So I'm going to click on the F10 for Hold, Loan, Pick, Quote, and Special Order button. Remember, some of those may not be applicable for you. And I'm going to click on Special Order. So special order is assuming that you're either going to do an outside order for this item or you're going to take a deposit. So I'm going to press the Enter key, and I can fill in as much or as little of this information as I'd like to. So in this case, my purchase order number for this account happens to be required, or I can make it for special orders that it's required. So I'm going to type in a purchase order number, press my Enter key. A due date is never required, but if you want to enter one, you can. And then I'm going to say that I'm going to take a $100 deposit on this item. Press the Enter key. What's my deposit type? Typically, your deposit type is cash or credit card or check, but for this example, I'm going to take cash. My special order deposit can show up on my screen. It's going to display the amount tendered that I entered in that previous screen. I'm going to press the Enter key, and then it typically shows this message. Do I want to print this? Yes or no. You can print a copy for your customer if they're standing in front of you. If they're not, you don't need to waste the paper. I'm going to say no in this case. And then depending on how the logic is that's set up in your system, you may see Create Purchase Order from Special Order. I can say no, and it's simply going to finalize my ticket. If I choose yes, it's going to give me a box. It's going to show what the part numbers are that I have on my screen that are eligible for special order. Perhaps I don't have quantity on hand available, or they're the only ones that I'm going to order. I can, and this is giving me all of the information that comes from those parts. Who is my default supplier? Is it going to create a purchase order, or am I going to add this to an existing worksheet? And then what's my quantity that I'm going to add? So because I put these items on the ticket twice as 2 different line items, it's putting them as 2 different line items here. If I had simply sold 1 line item to quantity, it's going to show that on this screen. So I can alter this information if I want to. I can alter the supplier that I'm purchasing it from. Maybe ELG is my default, but I'm getting it from the vendor down the street, so I can change these if I want to. I'm not going to at this point. And I'm going to click on the Control-W Process Purchase Order. Now what that does is that's going into my purchase order program and creating an immediate purchase order for these items so that I have a paper trail for those items that I've special ordered. I'm going to click on the Press Any key to finish this, and then my ticket is on hold as a special order, and also my purchase order is waiting to be received. If I pull up that account number, you're going to see a list that looks like this, or a message that looks like this. Customer 109 already has a ticket on special order. If I click on Retrieve Ticket, it's then going to give me a listing of anything that's on hold or special order for this customer. Now I could go straight to this hold window if I wanted to. That's a setting in the back office. You'll discuss that with us when you're setting up your system. If you went to the catalog, if you have a catalog, the vehicle information will show up over here on the right. The other way for information to show up on the right here is if I enter it into the comment field. So if you look at point of sale, you have an invoice comment field in this lower right corner. I'm going to run through that real quick to show you how that works. So I chose not to pull up that special order. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to write test into my invoice comment. I'm going to create a ticket and I'm going to put it on hold. F10 ticket status, I'm going to put it on hold, and no, I don't want to print it. When I pull up my account number now, I have items on hold and items on special order. If I want to look at them, I click on the Retrieve Ticket, And the reason that I have it set up this way is because to choose this, I simply press the Enter key. So to stop me from pressing the Enter key accidentally and pulling up a ticket that is already on hold, I'm simply popping up that message to alert me that there are items on hold if I choose to access them. And you'll notice that the ticket on the right has the comment of test, and that was the information that I entered into those invoice comments. On the left-hand side of the screen are my reference numbers, my store number, and then my transaction codes, which is helpful because remember, I have a special order and I have a ticket that's just on hold. Any tickets that are on hold or pick or quote, just hold or pick, are going to show up as an I. A quote is going to show up as a Q, and remember, in most systems, a quote is just paper. And a special order is going to show up with a D, and that means that I was allowed to take a deposit on that transaction. If you have any questions about anything we've gone over at this time, please call 800-829-4722 or send us an email at sbctraining@autolog.com. Thank you so much for your time.